Ladies and gentlemen, likers and subscribers, hobbyists, model makers, nerds of all kinds, welcome. I'm the Glue and Paper Guy. I was exploring something called Pepakura Designer. Pepakura Designer is the place where you will find the creatures that will be featured in Creature Feature. There's a large library that goes with the program. The program itself is free, although if you license it, you get an additional feature which sometimes makes things a little simpler. I stumbled on my friend here, our Disney character, and just had to do it. There's a backstory that's probably not appropriate here. When I was done, I realized that his eyes weren't quite alive enough, and I asked my wife for her clear nail polish. Okay. And look what it did. It lit up his eyes. So he has a little bit of detail on his lips and other things. We're going to build Shrek step by step here. I'll take you through some of the things that have to do with Pepakura Designer. I'll take you through my technique for cutting this stuff, making this stuff, and the strategy that I apply to building this. This model is, I don't know how well this will translate on the camera. Shrek is a balloon. All you're really constructing here is the surface. So when we construct it, we're going to do the deal here. It's going to look like him. It's going to have less seams and lines. This model is what I call a plastico. Plastico being the Italian for maquette, which is French. The little sculpture that the artist makes before he builds the final piece. So this is the Shrek Plastico. This time, these are going to turn into eyeballs. 3 because I've got to screw it up once before I get it right. I've gone so far as to borrow an airbrush and found that there's paint for human eyes. So we'll go through Pepakura. We'll build this step by step. I'll go through how-to on tools and materials. In the end, Shrek is going to actually have some features which allow him to stand on a stand. We're going to close in his bottom, and we're going to use the ping pong ball eyeballs to make them even that much more alive. Let's cut some paper.
Pepakura Designer by Tamasoft. The latest version is 417, as you see. Pepakura is not a 3D rendering program. Pepakura is a very easy to use program for creating polygons of increasing complexity to create paper models. There is a gallery of kits on the site. This is where we found Shrek. The variety of things is somewhat astounding. You saw a cat there, motorcycle after motorcycle, hundreds of these little figures. Japanese card modelers use this software extensively. It's the character of a lot of things that you find there. The person probably had a plastic model and then rendered it with a 3D program and turned it into a pattern. You can download PDF files, Shrek, and hundreds of other things from the site for free. Pepakura is free. Saving changes in a PDF file is not free. The function is called export. You have to pay for the privilege of export. It's relatively inexpensive. I would do it. You see the range of stuff here. I want to build that one day. I certainly enjoyed the series with the wormhole. I'll take you into the program and show you a brief tutorial of how the program works and a brief tutorial of how to use the program in practice with the model. This is the Pepakura Designer interface. Pepakura Designer is a superset of Pepakura Viewer. Pepakura Viewer is not simply a subset, it also has excellent functionality that helps the modeler construct what they're trying to build. It shows where tab A goes into slot B. Right now we have the original model rendered in 3D and another program imported into Designer. Designer has already decided the polygons that it wants to make. You can zoom in and zoom out on the model, take a look at it from any angle. You always know the ideal external dimensions. As you zoom in with the scroll wheel, you can right click and drag to rotate the model at any angle. Pepakura Designer's biggest function is to unfold this three-dimensional shape into parts that you can then assemble. I download a PDO file. I receive it in an unfolded state. Normally I'm going to unfold here as a demonstration. I then push the parts together as much as possible so that I print fewer pages. I next remove lines that indicate where scoring is to be done. Finally, there is a function that lets you pad the color onto the joining tabs. Insanely useful. I wish I had used it when I built the first Shrek. So I'll take you through the workflow here really quickly. I'm going to hit the unfold button and it is going to generate a set of pages that are separate. So before I do that, we're going to shrink up the left side so we can see what's going to happen on the right side. Same zoom functions work on either side. This is the default grid. 18 pages is the estimate that the program made. The cleverly hidden button at the top that says unfold generates pages of parts. This is not optimized in any way, shape, or form. These can be rotated and shrunk to the point where there are only 12 or 14 pages. If you do that, you can print this model at full scale and receive one that's 11 3/4 inches deep and more or less that size cubically. I'm going to bring Shrek up a little bigger again and just obscure these pages for the moment. One of the really useful things that the program does is allows you to pick parts and identify them. I've highlighted one there by accident. If I click on this part, on the left you see that Shrek's nose is now turned red. Perhaps he's had too much to drink or he's being a clown. That works for any part. I can highlight a lip, I can highlight an eyebrow, and then I can understand where one part goes with another. I can use that then to optimize the pattern that I'm going to generate. Put all the eyebrows together. Standard movement tools here. Highlight the part, grab it on its mass somewhere, and you can move it as you choose. If you don't like it that way, you can rotate it. And ultimately come to a point where you've compressed all your parts down, reduced the number of pages, made it easier to print, and made it optimized to print at full scale. I printed Shrek originally at shrink to fit, which reduces his size by some measure. If I print him full size with an optimized pattern, I get something that a child for sure and perhaps an adult could put over their heads. If one omits the eyes from the pattern, it becomes a mask, and I suspect that's why the eye sockets are really poorly rendered. It was never intended to have eyeballs in there full time. We move parts to optimize there's no rules about that. I can move entire large parts to another page. The next thing that is incredibly valuable that can be done, I'm going to highlight this page and then bring up his nose again. Pick on his nose because it has lots of bits and pieces. Those score lines can be eliminated. In the other settings menu, settings, other settings, I always leave the cut lines on. That way I know where to cut. I can turn off the mountain and valley fold lines, and suddenly I have a smooth exterior. I no longer have those dotted lines that are going to translate into my final. When you look at the Plastico, you'll see that it's got dotted lines all over it, which obscures the beauty of the piece. The last thing I do is go into the 2D menu, add outline padding. A little bit more zooming before I actually execute the function. Watch what happens along this line. 2D menu, add outline padding. The texture is extended past the place where you would fold it. The upside is you now only have to deal with coloring a crease, and joined parts will have a very clean edge, much less make pretty between parts. The downside is that it will be slightly tougher to score and cut. I simply use a pattern that I printed previously with the cut lines on it as a reference and score each piece. And a brief tutorial will come through on that as well. The last piece of this puzzle is Pepakura Viewer. I'll open it and demonstrate some of its functionality to you as well. We're now in Pepakura Viewer. The interface is exactly the same, the difference being many of the icons are now green. I can do the same thing I've done before. You may have even noticed that some lines shooting around, and we'll go back to those and look at them in detail in a second. I can do the same thing you've already seen me do. All the movement works the same, everything else. Let's get him looking us in the eye. And make him big. As you see, if I click on his lip, here you get a real view of the part and how it lays on there. It doesn't just turn red anymore. If I zoom in on the right side, focus on the chin, and do that again, you will see a very useful thing. I click on the chin, and on the left side the chin is highlighted. It makes it a little easier to see what's mountain and what's valley. Mountain being the dark blue line, valley being the light blue line. If I do that, you see how I get to see the part. That's the right side of his chin. I get to see the part, but every time I touch an edge, it tells me where it goes. That part goes to a whole different part. There's a green arrow there. Come in a little closer so that it's really obvious. As those dart around and one begins to wonder if we're actually seeing something or hallucinating. So I'm highlighting the score line against the part, and I'm guided to where it goes. Not only am I guided to where it goes, but I see the entire join area in red. I'm going to leverage this functionality heavily as I build this time. show you one more thing here. We'll spend the last part of this video working on paper I use, the tools I use, other basics. If all goes well, we'll have a big finish. The big finish being a part of Shrek assembled. When I originally built this model, I started back here. Keep your hands and arms inside the car at all times during the ride. It was insanely easy to assemble these two parts together, so I did. That was a mistake. As the model gets cumulatively more detailed, the cumulative assembly error propagates. Ultimately, in some ways, he looks almost like this exploded view, because I didn't color the parts. There are white lines between all of these junctions, and that tends to be smaller here than it is here. Now, cognizant of that failure, we're going to do this an entirely different way. I am going to start with his nose and work outward. We won't build the eyes because we're going to use ping pong balls to build the eyes. As I work outward from the nose, my next goal is to render as exquisitely as is possible the orbits and the eyebrows. I'll work down from there through the upper cheeks into the lips, with an eye toward having a mask. I want to get to where the center of what you see here is in finished condition, ready to receive the ping pong ball eyes with some structure assembled inside later. The mouth, probably going to be back with some construction paper such that it's hidden. As I think about it, I have some ways to add some teeth, perhaps. Once this mask is done, I'm going to proceed from there to do the easy stuff. From there, I'll probably assemble the ears and set them aside, then build the rest of the neck, the collar, the back of the head. Once all of those things are of a shape, I am going to build something to hold the model up here, some round shape that will set inside the model and be its support. A shaft will come directly straight through that and out to a stand with another piece is hidden by the outer edges but covers this. I'll do some light blocking with an intent to make it seem more solid. We'll probably mention off and on that when you work on Pepakura models, you're building a balloon. You're building only the outer surfaces. Some models require a lot of structure. In my intro video, I talked about Marvin the Martian. He was Pepakura, and he just kind of folded up. By the time that big head had leaned on the rest of that light body long enough, it was a mess. So there we go. We'll go from here to looking at materials and techniques. Finish this episode up with a nose and some orbits. Here's my basic tool set on the left. 2 different sized aluminum rulers with rubber bumpers under the bottom that keep them from moving on the paper.
I've never found replacements. They are scrapbooking rulers originally. If somebody can find some for me, please comment. I have rucked up the blades pretty good. 2 different sizes scissors. I do not cut parts out with scissors. They tend to be useful when placing or trimming. That mechanical pencil has been with me since middle school. 4 different kinds of pliers with different blades. You see the side cutters there. Again, useful for trimming at the last moment. The clamps are invaluable on those occasions when you need that third thumb. On the right is a metal pick. The metal pick is used for scoring paper. I'll demonstrate that. The 2 hobby knives, one a number 11 blade, the other a flat blade, are used for cutting the paper and buttering on some glue, respectively. All the glue I use is PVA. Its curing time is simply slightly different depending upon what I use. I do use some CA occasionally. Another look at the human eyes paint set and the ping pong ball eyeballs. You see I've kept myself a couple of brushes for that. All the coloration for the eyes is something that would actually be on a human eye. The foam board will be the stand. I have done a nearly inordinate amount of yapping in this video. It is now time to actually do something valuable. Paper. One of the first questions that people ask is, what about paper? When they go into paper crafting. This paper is 65-pound bond with a fine finish. You can often find it as cover paper or other things in your favorite office supply store. My needs are much greater. I gave up and bought 500-page reams off the internet. The thing about it is heavy enough to have some strength, light enough to go through the printer, strong enough to hold a fold. The texture should be as smooth as possible so that it doesn't detract from the texture of the resulting model. It's cheap, it's easy to get, so like so much of paper crafting, it's relatively simple to get your hooks on it. And it's not going to break the bank. So I have 2 things here. I have my 16-page pattern. This is going to be Shrek. These parts are the parts that have all of the enhancements done to them in Pepakura. They have the extra edges, etc. I'm going to do a bit of a scoring demonstration and do some assembly. Then I may take some brief video as I do the rest of the face and include it to wrap up this episode of the Shreckening. The other pattern that I have in hand matches this one, but has the cut and fold lines on it. It's my score reference. So when I find a part in the final pattern that I want to score, I know where to score it from this. From experience, I know that that is the center, right, and left of Shrek's chin and his lips. Big pieces, easy to see the action. Not going to be the first parts I make, but there will be excellent fodder for a scoring demonstration. One sheet, as you see, I printed it one-sided. There are cases when you'll print two-sided because you'll want detail on both sides of a piece. In this case, that's superfluous. So put the rest of the pattern aside. I always keep my not working stuff away from me so that my big ham hands don't ruin something. Close enough. I've been doing some other things that required actual sanding on paper here in the shop, and got some dust on that first page. So I need to rifle the score reference. Should have done that off screen. Well, I didn't. Find that set of parts. I did this previously just as an exercise to myself maybe make it a little clearer to the person on the other end of the camera. Those black lines represent where the final parts will be scored. So besides being able to see that, you can also get a better idea of what's going on. There's my page. I'm just going to keep that handy for reference. The third thumb holds the rest of it together so I don't try to build something from this into the pattern. And away we go. You saw in the basic tools this guy. He'd been with me since the 1980s. Sometimes the camera won't focus. It's a metal pick. Originally that picked ink out of check protectors in tiny little towns all over Texas. It's been doing duty for more than a decade cutting scoring paper models. So with the fine point on one end and its crooked point on the other, which has had some damage, I can spread glue with this guy, score paper with this guy. I have my reference. I have the aforementioned rulers. See, this one doesn't even have a name on it. I have no idea who the vendor is. But for whatever reason, it's nearly impossible to obtain something with this fantastic longitudinal handle, an edge that is very, very close to the paper, and bumpers on the bottom to keep it from slipping against the paper. This one is, that's my 8-incher. It's short, it's simple, easy to use. I'm gonna first, kind of the drill with every part, I'm gonna first score the edges, and then, you know, pick a start and pick a finish and walk up the part. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Yeah, this is fiddly. Requires a little bit of patience. I have a good idea where the bend is there on that first exterior piece. There is also a simple trick. Parts more or less same size. If I don't know where a bend is, the easiest thing to do is just measure it and figure it out. My eyeball tells me that is 6 millimeters, give or take. I can also measure 6 millimeters down this line. 5, 6. Park my scriber. And this is going to be backwards from what you see, but what I'm doing is I'm using the scriber as a pivot for the ruler. Rotate around, and I'm on the other very obvious corner. Zip. The score then becomes obvious. You want to watch that a little bit. That no way that's coming through on the camera, but I can see it in the back. You don't want to be crazy. If nothing, that might be a little too heavy. This piece is easy. Again, find the corners. If you doubt yourself, mark your corner, pivot against your tool, score. Can't really. It's annoying that I keep saying you can't really see this, you can't really see that. The extra ink protruding into the flaps will be of tremendous advantage here very soon. It confuses the issue. So you have to think that through and be careful not to be scoring where you don't want to be. That corner there, again, is somewhat problematic because it's hidden by that ink. So I can apply a calibrated eyeball. And I'm lifting as I pull to keep this guy straight. If this guy stays straight, I don't have parallax on the ruler edge, which can be a pain in the proverbial tail if it occurs. The whole idea is to make these parts fit together, right? And fit together right. So around and around she goes. Where she stops, nobody knows. Place, rotate, score. Place, rotate, score. And I'm going to walk up this part and we'll see where we go from there. I might do a trick. A lot of these are obvious because each of those scores makes a mark at a point, an obvious point. So that's quick and easy. Boom, 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 boom. This part has the advantage of having very few, if any, places where you've got to guess. I need to measure that, and ultimately I'll have to measure that in order to obtain those points. Having done that, it's pretty short and sweet. First thing we're going to do is work upwards. In this position, it's probably going to be a lot easier to see what I'm doing. Getting this straight, swinging that round, and score. Find my point, pivot against it, score. That one is half in two. So I can find that point just by letting feeling the change in the position of the scribe. Parenthetically, if you ever doubt yourself, take the scribe point, run it over the paper lightly, don't scratch it. It will tell you where you've scored and where you haven't because you feel it click into the hole. Now these last two cuts the last two scores are going to be the tough ones here. The last easy ones. Another good example you really see. There is parallax under that ruler. If I'm like this, I'm going to be off kilter. If I'm like this, I'm going to be off kilter. So it's about straightness. So I've gone halfway up. I need to measure these points. Now, I can kind of see it, but it's right about there and right about there. Trust but verify. Being a child of the 80s. You don't have to have one of these. It's useful. There are low-priced tool stores in most neighborhoods now. I happen to have it set for millimeters. This one has a marvelous ability to millimeters, inches. Click again. Inches in fractions, which for a guy who deliberately stopped taking math at college algebra is an advantage. I want to know the distance between those 2 points. It actually happens to be 9/32. Give or take, close enough for government work. Now the 9/32 are 11/64. Shed a little light on the matter. A little extra light. Yeah, 17/64. Fine dandy. Now, You can lock it. I don't. Moreover, you do not want to do this with a pencil because you're trying to keep your parts pretty. You can get one blade right there in that little hole because it's nice and convenient there. And then snuggle up your scribe. Come at it upside wrong. Scoring this way kind of inherently eliminates parallax, by the way. And I have a score. Now this point is obvious. I have a score. This point is not obvious. Mr. Caliper to the rescue. Try to find an anchor point that is an anchor point. And the thing about measuring that many people forget, the cumulative error can get bigger over distance. So the proportion of your error will be smaller if you take a longer baseline. This a little bit longer probably than that one. I bet they're dead equal. So I want to go there instead of, guesstimating it between these two. Also, that's a good fixed reference, whereas this one is our nebulous place. Five eighths. Can't beat it. One of my lives, my buzzword was, if you want to streamline a process, stop having to think. I can feel where it drops into the score right there. There's my point. That's going to be a big triangle where I'm going to come in from two obvious points. Here and its opposite number. Probably going to have to measure the middle on that other side, which is fine. We'll just do that. It's my, whoop, make it look easy. It's my pivot. It's my score. My pivot. My score. And there's one other quick score right here, which I'll just simply take care of because I'm looking at it. Done. Now I got to get down here in the middle. This is longer than this. This edge being longer than this edge, there will be less cumulative error here than there will be here if I measure from here to here. An obvious point to the center point. Three-quarters. My spot. And that's going right down to the center of that V. So, enough of that. According to this, I've got 16 3/4 pages left to go. This time I'm not going to bother to score them all first. I have done that in the past. Potato, potato. But there's probably enough shadow in those lines, particularly if I go something like that and cross my fingers, to where you see that I've duplicated the action that I highlighted in ink. So I'm going to kill it. We'll be right back, and when we come back, all of these will be joined. These three parts are ready to join. I happen to know where they join. In fact, we looked in the earlier demonstration of Pepakura, and we saw those cuddle up to each other and lock in place. I've achieved all of these score lines. A couple of things of note: you can wander off kilter. I'm a little bit off there. You can measure long points regardless of anything that happens in the middle. That's one line. So the distance between here and here eliminates cumulative error better than walking down there. I missed one, which I'll have to catch before I start joining them, or after I cut it. Otherwise, everything here is done. A couple of times I made score points with the tool and then went back to them. There's enough stuff going on here that I had to mark here and then score. As long as you don't damage the part, it doesn't matter. And again, whenever you get confused, you can just use the... You will find this point very easily just by doing that. Don't do it too heavy, because some papers and some inks you will scratch it, which you don't want. So a quickie here. I have 2 points. Bam. That's done. Time to cut. Number 11 razor knife. Some people sharpen these. I have not explored that. I simply buy enough blades. You can go all around John's barn, but you will come back to the number 11. It cuts a large variety of different weights of material. It has that sharp blade. They're quick and easy to replace. They're common as cordwood. The minute I snap that tiny little hole end off, it's gone. And you can feel when it gets dull enough that it's not cutting the paper properly. The cut changes. The sharp blade with nearly no effort will open up the paper. A dull blade, you have to do that twice. The minute you have to cut a spot twice, new blade. I have my handy dandy little recycle here. That is some Frustum Testing. Frustum being the most common shape in any rocket model you'll ever have. A frustum, for those of us who aren't trying to show off, is simply a truncated cone. Alright, back to business. Because of the additional ink here, I have to rely somewhat on my score lines to know where to start a cut. Parallax applies. When I put the blade down, I place it down. I can feel when it punches through the paper because I'm using, Mark 1 Mod 0 matte. So I tend to place it straight, press through until it cuts, and then pull against the blade. I also tend to rotate the blade this way. Reason being, steel cuts aluminum. So if I rotate the blade slightly, I will not damage my trusty friend. May not be obvious, but that wasn't necessarily straight because of the way I cut it. You have to pay attention to these things. The points will be deducted when you see a finished model and things are a little whopper jawed because of the additional play in parts. Some of that's inevitable. We're doing things to mitigate that as much as is humanly possible. I try to pick apart and finish it, and then I leave the sprue behind. Reason being, I don't lose the parts. I don't damage the parts. I'm going to cut these 3 out. I'm going to lay the rest of the lips aside and return to them when I want them so that they're not damaged in the process. Pretty much the same story as scoring. I tend to protect the part. And that changes with different circumstances, different geometrical figures and stuff like that. Sometimes you got to do it the other way because you need to know where the cut begins and ends. In this case, I can mostly protect the part with the ruler. I got a good grip. It's not going anywhere because it has its rubber bumpers. The paper's not going anywhere because it's under the rubber bumpers. Place, rotate, cut. I don't cut any more than necessary. I'm not trying to save the blades. I'm just don't want to cut another part. Place, rotate just a touch, cut. And that's, I mean, that is right on the line. Now we can see the advantage of the extra ink and what's going to happen with this very real edge will be, you know, happen here in a minute. Well, we'll just do one, kill the camera, try to keep you away from the boring stuff. That's really a case where you could do it the other way, but you don't want to do that. Protect the part. Those two lines are almost straight, but in Pepakura, almost is not. I would counsel make no assumptions. Cut from junction to junction. A lot of times I'll go around a part and do this. Just cut these out by hand. Because it doesn't matter, they're going to disappear. I'm cutting into the part, so I need to pay attention where I stop. The only thing that makes that possible is experience in my case. And you notice I'm being more careful about the tab because I have this point right here that's going to join another part, and I want that to be an accurate angle. I want that to be as sharp as it can be. When I first began this, I did not freehand a lot with a blade. I now know where I can get away with playing fast and loose and do it to my advantage. Tab is a tab is a tab is a tab, so there's no reason to work hard about these edges. It's all going to disappear. Come out in the wash, as it were. I'll go back and get those in a minute. Yeah, it's just kind of a thing. I know what I'm going to freehand. I'll try to get the meat point as accurate as humanly possible, and then go back and free it from the paper. There are hundreds of parallels in this hobby with styrene modeling. Recently started watching a guy by the name of Ken Spriggs, an incredibly talented scratch builder and an amazingly detailed artist. He works in styrene. During one of his demonstrations, he pulled out a part from a submarine. That is one of the kits that my admired friend Ron Cadillo collaborated on. He was building the styrene version of the same paper kit. I had asked him to make sure he didn't have a pattern I didn't know about. He was very charming in his reply and said that no, that was the one I recognized. Okay, we'll cut these two out, then we're going to talk about part prep. We have a fully bonded chin. Start at the lips, bottom lip, chin. This goes down towards the Adam's apple. I've got a consistent cumulative error across these 2 points. I'm not sure what that will entail elsewhere. I do know that right now I have the opportunity to throw in an extra crease to help with that later. This is still flat enough that I can get away with some things. So I'm going to do that. And I want to support it on some convenient random object so that I don't damage the rest of the part. I'm just going to lay that down right there. And I'm aiming at the two join points at the very edge. Just stick my pick right there. Stick my pick right there. Cross my fingers, hold my breath. It looks like I'm seated on this. TLC. Now, it becomes necessary, I can bend that more closely later to hide those seams, and then work with this as I join the two parts. That's all going to happen right here. And in the Plastico, that was all consistent. Why the difference here, I don't know. It's probably me. But these can then be trimmed and teased into place a little better so that the fit remains the same. That's just going to take some care and focus. Word about color on the edges. Then we're going to take a hiatus and try to actually produce the face. So that's darker but still lighter than the color of the lip. That's on the green spectrum and lighter than anything else. And we've got that's pretty close to ideal. When I finish this off, however, there are spots where there's tiny little open areas. I'll have to go in there and just, thinking about just some green paint to fill the spots. Probably do that as this is placed under the lip. And we'll start hanging this about the time we get down into here, from here. So I'm going to do this and get to here, start hanging this, and before I start going around, we're going to go in the back and basically hold it up to the light and look for the light spots and see if we can make them disappear with something. I just want it to be more solid when it's finished, and I believe right now that that will accomplish that. Well, here we go, friends, the big finish. I wanted to get to the point where I had something substantive to show off before I wrapped up the video. It's been quite a while. You see here on the left side of the screen is the Plastico, the original piece. And here then is the new iteration of the same thing. I wanted to get to the point where I had built the entire face because that was the most challenging piece. And I said before that I wanted to start with the orbits and work outward. I've done that. The extended color was incredibly valuable. By the way, it's exactly 1/32 of an inch on average. 1/32 of an inch, or 0.0295 inches, or 0.75 millimeters. Incredibly valuable in those instances where you don't know where the line is. You see that the cumulative error has been managed. Each of these parts fits very well and very closely together. The gapping is minimal. I don't know how well it'll come through, but a little liquid stain, but you know, he's got some spin on his lip. Little tiny parts at the side. The challenge here was to get all of them arranged properly. Some of them were gosh, as small as a thumbnail cutting. And coincidentally, absolutely necessary. I'll show the progress on the eyeballs in a few minutes, and you'll understand why. One of the things that I did as well was I found that there were some parts that were intended to be an internal part of the orbit, perhaps to support the eyeball. They're useless. They're superfluous. They get in the way, and they just cause trouble. So I ended up cutting them down. Plenty of support there to CA the eyeballs in. Away we go. This about coloring. I guess the first thing I did was I gathered up every green map pencil I had and laid them out in a row. You'll see that there's different values of green for each part. So I would start by matching the green, laying down a layer of green in the waxy map pencil. It'd be a combination of that and my very favorite watercolor pencils. Watercolor pencils get expensive fast, so I have a pretty simple set. That was a recommendation from Rod Cadillo, by the way, and he was absolutely right. Sometimes addition of browns or blacks. The idea to get the coloration right, the idea always is to make the line disappear as much as is reasonable. It's not hard to figure out what line you want to disappear. It's the edge of the part that doesn't have a fold line. This part was a color test. It still has the score lines on it. You can see that the color's a little bit different, variation in time and printer will change the color. So you don't need to color these parts because with the expanded color, that's superfluous. You do need to color any place where you don't have a tab so that the line tends to disappear more. I did not do that at all on this, and the result is, kind of blindingly freaking obvious. You get stuff like this. Another trick that I learned. You get ahead of yourself, you get in a hurry, you forget to color the side of a part. I took a Post-it note, which is about half the thickness of this paper, laid it down like a mask, aimed the pencil perpendicularly, something like this, and colored with a sharp point. In so doing, I could disappear the color and at the same time have a perfect finished part without having to take it apart again and start over. A brief break, I'll grab the eyes and I'll show you how the eyes fit. Well, there you go. These are the same ping pong balls, glued, as I've showed before, down so that I can do whatever I want with them. There's my panic spot there. I painted these by hand first. Dumb. Brush strokes, I couldn't make the brush strokes disappear. It was just problematic. So I sanded them off and then shot them with this slightly off-white acrylic. Then masked them somewhat amateurishly with some painter's tape. I cut circles out of painter's tape with a stencil, and then laid the painter's tape down over. Well, now I have the basis of a pupil, and I'm close enough. I'm not far off. I can make an eyeball out of that. There's no rules that say that, I am not going to go find the Pantone numbers for this guy's eyes. They're going to be close enough to look right. They'll have the highlights. They'll be good to go. I hope this isn't too creepy. There's the intent. I can put the ping pong ball in there and I have a virtually infinite surface to rotate and set so we don't get a cross-eyed or a cockeyed Shrek. And with the tabs that are available, I should have plenty of glue surface, which I can work from the outside. I can put CA over them from the outside and hold them in place. I don't know. We'll find out. I'll try to get some images of pain in the eyes, etc. as we go forward. Well, there you go. It's been a long, busy video. Lots about Pepakura, lots about Shrek himself, lots about technique, and a big finish. I look forward to hearing some comments. I'd like to know if you guys think Shrek 2 is better than Shrek 1, and how well he, I'm hoping you guys are going to say, hey, that's great, you did better. Next up in the future, the top of the cranium, the back of the head, and the collar are quick and easy. It's ear time next. I'm going to try a little time lapse or something making the ears. Try to go one ear from cradle to grave. The construction of the head itself is just grunt work. And right now I have this vision of a single episode that includes all of that. So with that, I've learned an immense amount about how to do these things. I've learned an immense amount about how long it takes. I've had a lot of living in between. And I'm ready to do some more. I hope you guys like this. And as always, like and subscribe. That's the Glue and Paper Guy signing off for this one. I look forward to showing you the next one.